Hello, everybody, and welcome to the brand new podcast, Harvesting the Future, where we'll be talking about all things water reuse, rainwater harvesting, greywater recycling, and stormwater attenuation. Each week, we'll be covering a brand new topic about water reuse, and we'll be bringing a very special guest along the way. This week, we're joined by our very own Lisa Craven. Some of you may know her as Lisa Farnsworth. She's recently got married, and here she is today.
Hi, Matt. Thank you for having me. It's exciting to be doing our first ever podcast.
Thank you for joining us.
You are welcome.
And if you could for those who don't know you, could you give us a bit of an introduction about you, a bit about your journey, and a bit about StormSaver in general?
Yeah, of course. So my journey into water reuse was probably not the traditional journey. I studied theatre design at university, at Nottingham Trent University. I then worked in theatre for a couple of years, sadly got made redundant, and then did a part-time job doing some telesales. It turned out I was actually really good at telesales. I had to sell some courses online. I had 3 months to do it, and I did it in 2 weeks. At the time that I was doing these sales and actually really enjoying it, Michael was about to launch his first rainwater harvesting system. And he said to me, why don't you come and work for me for 3 months and try and get through all of these inquiries that we've had for rainwater harvesting. So I said I'd give him 3 months. And I'm still here 25 years later.
And here you are today.
That's right. So what I then found was I started as sales director in the company. I found that actually I had a real passion for rainwater. It really interested me. I didn't realise at all that there was such a massive problem in the UK with water because we're a very wet country. And the more and more I found out about it, the more and more I decided that this was what I wanted to do with my career. I wanted to make a real difference.
What would you say really excites you about the water reuse industry at the moment?
I think at the moment it's very current. I mean, having been in the industry for over 2 decades and knowing what the problem is, it's exciting now to see people talking about it. I love the fact that it's sustainable. It falls on our roof clean, clear every single day. And the fact that we can collect that and reuse that, it just seems to be nonsensical to be using mains water for things that just don't need it.
Exactly, yeah. We've got real issues with water at the moment, so it's never kind of been a more pressing topic, if you like. Could you give us a bit of an overview about StormSaver, where that kind of started, and a bit of a journey about where we are now and perhaps where we was in the past?
Yeah, of course. So StormSaver started in our spare bedroom and eventually we grew to kind of a few more people and the early days really were kind of banging your head against doors of architects and consulting engineers trying to actually convince them that this was a viable technology. And so it was really, really tough in the early days. But what we found was the idea got some traction. People started specifying rainwater harvesting in projects. And then over the years, the technologies of greywater recycling started to come in as well. And then eventually we managed to come up with a solution for combining those technologies through active attenuation. So actually the product range of the business has grown massively over the last 2 decades. The other area that we've actually expanded in the business is the maintenance side. So we have a team of engineers now that go across the UK, servicing systems, replacing systems that maybe are beyond their life expectation, which is around sort of 15 to 20 years for a control panel. And we go around and retrofit systems as well for all sorts of buildings and all sorts of clients across the UK.
It's a really exciting time to be in the industry, isn't it?
It is an exciting time. We're seeing lots of conversation, lots of movement and positivity towards harvesting water that we haven't seen in the past 20 years. Definitely now is the time for water reuse.
Each episode, we're going to be focusing on a different topic, and I think one that's really timely at the moment is talking about the future of water efficiency in the UK and kind of what that looks like. But I think what really is important at the moment is addressing the barriers to getting rainwater harvesting and water reuse as the norm in the UK.
So for Storm Saver, we have a mission, and that's to see every building with water reuse in some way, shape or form. And I think the future of water does look like that. We can't carry on as we are. We are going to have to make some changes, and we do have to make them now. Sir James Bevan, in his famous Jaws of Death speech, made it very clear that we are going to not have enough water by 2050 if we don't make some changes. And so that has really galvanised the industry to actually start to put in guidance and legislation to encourage water reuse products. It's the first time in my career that I have seen such positivity towards really making changes. And now it's time to call on the government and DEFRA to actually put those changes into things like building regulations, new British standards, so that we can make sure that we are using water reuse wisely, we're doing it safely, and we're doing it in the proper way, and making sure that we maintain it as well. And you're absolutely right, Matt. There are barriers to water reuse. They are wide-ranging. That comes from the product itself, making sure that that product is safe to use, making sure that we adhere to all of the things that DWI, RAS, DEFRA, all of those requirements, the requirements of the water companies, they all have got specific things that they want us as manufacturers to provide. And we need to work with them to make sure that we're doing things safely, that we're doing things correctly, and that we can do this on a mass scale. And the market is ready to gear up for that. Another barrier to water reuse will be the cost. And so lots of people in the early days in particular talked about paybacks. I think people are getting much more realistic now about paybacks of rainwater harvesting. Obviously, you save money because you're not using mains water, and that's a real benefit. You're actually having a sustainable supply, which for big businesses nowadays is really important. They've got to tick a sustainability box. They've got to make sure that they are showing their customers that they're actually doing something about water.
It's about brand reputation as well, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. And so this is a real opportunity for the big brands out there to kind of say, look, we're doing this. This is the way forward. Follow us, rather than, sort of, and lead people in the right direction in terms of how we build much more sustainably, how we're responsible when it comes to water. So there's other barriers we need to talk about. So the maintenance side of things, people are concerned about the ongoing costs. We have a solution for that, particularly with the housing developers, and that's a communal approach. So rather than installing individual systems in individual homes, what we will do is we will install a communal system which provides all of those homes with water that's been reused, either from rainwater or greywater. That means having one large tank rather than lots of little ones. It means having plant equipment in one place rather than in individual homes. And that means that the maintenance is taken away from the homeowner, which is really important because they don't know what they're doing. They're not going to do it. How often do I clean my washing machine filters out? Not very often.
We use the car service analogy quite a lot here at Storm Saver, don't we? So actually, not a lot of people maintain their cars properly. So how can we expect these to maintain a rainwater harvesting system?
Exactly, yeah. If you don't do it, it's not going to work. But if you don't do it properly, that's the key thing about this. And actually, to try and maintain 50 systems on a new housing development and get homeowners in all at the same time, it's just not going to be feasible, is it? So actually to have a community system where actually you're taking that away from the homeowner and taking that pressure away from them actually makes it much more cost effective. We've estimated that you could get maintenance down to around £7 to £11 per home a year, which is fantastic. So actually that makes it really viable and helps remove one of those barriers to water reuse.
I think that's a really important point as well in terms of public health and making sure that there's no cross-contamination between the sustainable supply and the potable water supply.
Yeah, and that's something that we're really passionate about at Storm Saver. Quality and integrity of our systems has always been absolutely key. It's really important to make sure that if we're doing this, that we're doing it properly. And we've got to give those organisations and those stakeholders from the water industry confidence that we as suppliers and manufacturers know what we're doing, and confidence that then we can carry on and look after it afterwards.
Another important consideration we come across quite a lot in the industry is obviously space. Buildings are getting much smaller, costs are going up as well, so obviously space is at a premium. So how would you kind of respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, certainly spaces can be a massive issue for our clients, but there's lots of things that we can do to help. So particularly, some clients don't have room to put the underground storage tank in. These things can be massive. And so active attenuation can actually combat that. Most buildings will have to have attenuation now. We're going to see Schedule 3 of the Flood Act enacted soon. And so actually that's going to become mandatory on all sites. So if you're going to put an attenuation system in, you may as well use those crates for storing water for reuse. So that's a good way of mitigating having to put in 2 tanks. So another technology we're seeing more and more is blue roofs. That's where people store water on the roof rather than storing it underground or in different parts of the building or in an above ground tank. That's a technology that we can again use with our products for water reuse. So that's definitely a viable way ahead for people that don't have the space on the ground.
So blue roofs are actually something that we're seeing quite a lot of, especially in London and Manchester and densely populated areas. A question I get asked a lot is how does that impact water quality, especially when it's a blue-green combined roof? How does that affect water quality and what filtration would that require?
So the most important thing is making sure when you're using a blue or a green roof that you've got the right filtration in place. That could be using carbon filters or additional filtration. It could be using UV disinfection, depending on what you're using the water for. So it's all just about making sure you've got the right technologies in place, depending on how you're actually collecting that water. Also, it's about just educating people in the building as well, making sure that they know they're using a reusable water supply and that they're using that water for the right applications. We're not using it for drinking or to hand basins or anything like that.
I think that really leads nicely onto our next point, and that's the fact that there is a lack of awareness around water scarcity in the UK, and that has been a barrier to installing water reuse and it becoming mainstream. Definitely.
Well, 2 areas really is not just about the lack of awareness of water scarcity, but also the value of water. Water's cheap, and it's plentiful as far as we're concerned. As soon as we turn on the tap, it's there. If we need it, it's there. But I think what we don't realise is actually water companies are not actually bound to provide commercial users with water. They actually can and do often say no, you're going to have to find your own water supply. And so actually that's why we're starting to see more areas declared as water neutral areas. And that's going to become more prevalent in the UK. And so actually educating people, so both in business and at home, to be more mindful of the water they're using, more mindful of the water they're wasting, is a key part of what we're trying to do at StormSaver, working with companies like Waterwise to put forward that education piece and make sure that people know there are alternatives out there.
Yeah, water neutrality is going to become an even bigger piece of legislation, isn't it, within local governments? What is water neutrality for people that don't know, and can you give us a bit of an overview of how that relates to water reuse?
So water neutrality is relatively new in the UK. What it means is that when you take a site and you propose to the planning authorities that you want to put a building on that site, that site cannot drain any more water than is already used on that site. So let us say, for example, you have an existing building and you want to extend it, you want to double its size. We will know that you are using a certain amount of water in that building already. By doubling the size, you cannot double the amount of water you need in that building. By the same token, people that want to build on brownfield or greenfield sites and build a building where actually there's no building there at the moment, you literally have to supply all of your water because you cannot extract any more water from that site. So that's about being water neutral. It's about making sure that you're not extracting any more water than is already used on that site.
So finally, Lisa, obviously it's a really exciting time to be in the industry at the moment.
It
and
is.
We're really excited.
We
and
are.
I know that a lot of people are as well. Where do you think the water reuse industry is heading?
So I think that we will see water reuse becoming the norm. Definitely. Certainly in commercial buildings, certainly when we're building new developments. I think that in order for that to happen, there needs to be conversations with all the stakeholders in the industry so that we all make sure that we are singing from the same hymn sheet. We've all got the same goals. Like I said before, making sure we do it safely, we do it correctly. We're making sure that we're doing these systems for the long term. That's really important. I'd like to see legislation. Certainly, we've been working with companies such as Waterwise, other people in the industry about making sure that we bring in new legislation that reflects exactly what our new buildings need in terms of water. And we would like to see things that support that. So British standards, and so make sure that not only are we doing things properly, but everyone is doing things properly. That's really important. And I think along with that, we've got to have a change in education. You know, we are too comfortable with water at the moment. It's cheap. People might not think it's cheap, but it is relatively cheap compared to other countries across Europe. We've seen awareness grow around energy use and the cost of electricity and gas as it's just gone through the roof. Water hasn't done that, but it will. And so actually now is the time to start mitigating that for people so that the cost of living doesn't hit there as well. What's also happened is we've seen that whilst people have now finally understood they can't use and waste electricity and gas, they've started to change their behaviour. And that's what we want to see with water as well. We want to do that education piece so that people know and understand that water is really precious. It isn't going to last forever. It is going to run out at some point. That is a proven fact. And if we don't do something now, if we act too late, then we're going to find ourselves in those jaws of death.
Thank you for watching the very first Harvest in the Future podcast. We hoped you enjoyed it as much as we did making it, and we'll see you very shortly. Goodbye.